Have you ever wondered what secrets might be hiding behind the eyes of the person you love most? What if the woman you married, the one who shares your bed, your hopes, your entire life, was something entirely different from what you believed? This is the story of Elena, a wife who carried a darkness so profound, so ancient, that her very existence would challenge everything we understand about love, survival, and the thin line between human and myth. Before we continue, share with us, where are you watching from? And if this story touched your heart, subscribe now. Because tomorrow, something truly powerful is coming your way. The mist-covered mountains of Cordillera had always been more than just a landscape to Miguel Santos. They were a living, breathing entity that whispered stories of old tales his grandmother would murmur during long winter nights. Stories of creatures that walked between worlds, of beings who could wear human skin like a delicate garment. Miguel had never believed those stories. Not until he met Elena. She appeared in his life like a sudden break in storm clouds, unexpected, breathtaking, impossible to ignore. He was a local forestry researcher, spending more time with ancient trees and mountain trails than with people. She worked at the small museum in town, a curator with eyes that seemed to hold centuries of untold stories. Their first meeting was nothing short of magical. Miguel was cataloging rare plant specimens when Elena approached him, her movements so fluid they seemed to dance between reality and something else entirely. She knew things about the forest that no ordinary person could know, the secret paths, the hidden water sources, the whispers of plants that most would dismiss as nonsense. Some plants remember, she'd tell him, her fingers tracing the bark of an ancient tree. They carry memories longer than any human could ever understand. Their courtship was a whirlwind. Elena was unlike any woman Miguel had ever known. She seemed to understand him in ways that defied explanation, anticipating his thoughts, sensing his moods before he could express them. Her knowledge was vast, her compassion limitless. When they married, the entire mountain community celebrated, seeing them as a perfect match. But perfection, Miguel would learn, was never what it seemed. Their home was a modest wooden structure nestled deep in the mountain forest, surrounded by trees so old they predated written history. Elena transformed it into a sanctuary, herbs hanging from the rafters, intricate talismans adorning the walls, books in languages Miguel had never seen before carefully arranged on shelves. Family heirlooms, she would say when he asked about their origin, her smile holding secrets deeper than the mountain valleys. At first, Miguel noticed only small, peculiar things. How Elena never seemed to get sick, despite the harsh mountain winters. How animals would grow silent and still when she walked near. How her skin would sometimes shimmer in moonlight, like something just beyond human understanding. But love has a way of explaining away the unexplainable. Their life together was filled with passion, intellectual discussions, and a connection so deep that Miguel believed they shared one soul. Elena supported his research, often accompanying him on expeditions, her knowledge of the forest surpassing even the most experienced local guides. Yet, beneath the surface, something stirred, something ancient, something waiting. Miguel would later realize that every moment, every shared glance, every tender touch was part of a larger narrative, one that Elena had been carefully weaving since the day they met. A story of survival, of protection, of a love so complex it transcended the boundaries of what humans could comprehend. Little did he know that the secrets Elena carried would soon transform their lives forever, that the woman he thought he knew completely was about to reveal a truth that would challenge everything he believed about humanity, about nature, about love itself. The mountains watched, the trees listened, and Elena waited, her true nature coiled beneath a human facade, ready to be unleashed. The boundary between myth and reality is far thinner than most people understand. Miguel Santos had spent his entire academic career believing in empirical evidence, in the cold, hard logic of scientific observation. Botanists like him, didn't believe in stories of forest spirits or ancient guardians. They cataloged, they classified, they explained, until the night everything changed. It began subtly. Small inconsistencies that Miguel initially dismissed. The way plants seemed to bend towards Elena when she walked near them. How wildlife would fall silent in her presence, not from fear, but from something closer to reverence. The strange artifacts in their home, objects that looked like they belonged in a museum of forgotten civilizations, rather than a researcher's modest mountain residence. The first real indication came during a routine research expedition. Miguel was mapping rare plant species in a remote mountain region when Elena joined him. She moved differently that day. Her steps were too precise, too connected to the landscape. When she touched a centuries-old tree, the bark seemed to ripple beneath her fingers, responding to something beyond human touch. "Some plants remember more than we can comprehend," she told him, her eyes reflecting something ancient and unknowable. At first, Miguel attributed her knowledge to years of local research. Elena had always been more connected to the mountain ecosystem than anyone he'd ever met. But that day, something shifted. A rare orchid species one Miguel had been searching for years suddenly appeared in a clearing where moments before there had been only dense undergrowth. Elena's smile was knowing, almost secretive. "The forest gives what it chooses to give," she said simply. That night, strange markings appeared around their home. Intricate symbols etched into the ground, created from a combination of stones, herbs, and what looked like dried blood. When Miguel questioned them, Elena deflected, changing the subject with a skill that would have impressed a diplomat. But the signs were accumulating. Their neighbors, local mountain people with generations of folklore, began to watch Elena differently. Hushed conversations would stop when she approached. Elderly women would make protective gestures behind her back, their eyes a mixture of fear and respect. The local shaman, an elderly man named Rodrigo, visited them unexpectedly one evening. His eyes fixed on Elena with an intensity that made Miguel uncomfortable. "You carry an old burden," Rodrigo said to her, his voice a low whisper. "The forest remembers its guardians." Elena's response was calm, but Miguel caught a flicker of something: fear? Anticipation? In her eyes, that night, everything changed. A sound unlike anything Miguel had ever heard emerged from the forest. Part howl, part something completely otherworldly. The windows rattled. The house seemed to breathe. Elena stood perfectly still, her body tense, eyes fixed on the darkness outside. "They found me," she whispered. When Miguel pressed for an explanation, Elena began to reveal the first threads of a story that would unravel everything he believed about the world. She spoke of ancient guardians, of a race of beings as old as the mountains themselves, tasked with protecting the delicate ecological and spiritual balance of the region. "The forest is dying," she said, "and with it, the magic that has protected these lands for centuries." Logging companies were more than an environmental threat. They were systematically destroying more than just trees. They were breaking ancient spiritual contracts, weakening protective barriers that had existed long before human civilization. Elena was the last, the final guardian. And now, something was coming to challenge her. The call to adventure had arrived. Miguel's world of scientific certainty was about to be completely transformed. The line between myth and reality was about to blur in ways he could never have imagined. Outside, something watched. Something hungry. Something ancient. The transformation of Miguel from a skeptical scientist to a guardian in training was brutal and unforgiving. Elena's training began the moment the first shadow entities started their assault. Their home became a living classroom of survival, where every lesson could mean the difference between life and death. Miguel learned that protection was more than physical, it was spiritual, ecological, a complex web of connections most humans had forgotten how to see. "Observe," Elena would say, her fingers tracing invisible lines of energy that seemed to pulse through the forest floor. The forest communicates constantly. Most humans have simply forgotten how to listen. Their first serious encounter came during a new moon, a time of maximum vulnerability. The logging companies had begun an aggressive clear-cutting operation in a sacred grove Elena had protected for generations. As night fell, the forest itself seemed to cry out. Trees began to bleed, not with red blood, but with a silvery liquid that looked like molten moonlight. Miguel watched in horror as ancient trees wept, their bark splitting in unnatural ways. Elena's body began to change, becoming translucent, merging with the forest's pain. "They're breaking the ancient contracts," she explained, her voice a mixture of human speech and something that sounded like wind through dying branches. "Each tree cut is more than timber, it's a spiritual wound." The shadow entities attacked. In waves, they were not simply creatures of darkness, but manifestations of ecological destruction-hungry spirits that fed on environmental trauma. Miguel learned to create protective barriers using combinations of specific herbs, stones, and ancient symbols Elena taught him. Their first line of defense was knowledge. Miguel used his scientific background to map the logging operations, discovering a pattern far more sinister than simple deforestation. Certain areas were being targeted with surgical precision sites of spiritual significance that Elena identified as critical ecological nexus points. By day, Miguel worked through official channels. He contacted environmental agencies, filed reports, used his academic credentials to raise alarms. By night, they prepared for supernatural warfare. Telling this story took time, care, and a lot of heart. If it moved you in any way, please consider subscribing. It really means everything to us. Now, let's return to the journey. Elena showed him how to read the forest's language. A particular bird's call could warn of approaching danger. The way moss grew on certain stones told stories of impending attacks. The subtle vibrations of the earth spoke volumes to those who knew how to listen, but the cost was tremendous. Each time Elena used her ancient powers, she seemed to fade a little more. Her body would become increasingly translucent, her connection to the human world growing tenuous. Miguel watched in growing terror as the woman he loved became both more and less than human. Their most challenging trial came unexpectedly. A group of loggers discovered ancient grove, a place Elena described as the heart of the mountain's spiritual ecosystem. As they prepared their machinery, Miguel and Elena realized they had to act. The battle was unlike anything Miguel could have imagined. Elena transformed completely. Her body became a living extension of the forest. Roots emerged from her feet, branches from her arms. She was no longer just defending the forest. She had become the forest. Miguel's role was protection and support. He used the mystical techniques Elena had taught him, creating barriers, channeling protective energies, fighting off the shadow entities that sought to consume the grove's spiritual essence. Their enemies were not just physical. The logging company was backed by something darker, an ancient entity that fed on ecological destruction. Each tree felled was a spiritual wound, weakening the protective barriers that had kept balance for centuries. "We are the last line of defense," Elena told him during a moment of respite, her body flickering between human and something else, a guardian spirit slowly being consumed by the very force she fought to protect. The trials tested everything. Their relationship, their understanding of reality, the very fabric of the ecological and spiritual world. Miguel discovered abilities he never knew he possessed. His scientific mind, once a barrier, now became a weapon. He could see the energy lines Elena had spoken about, intricate networks of spiritual connection that ran through the forest like bloodlines. They were losing ground, but they were not defeated. As dawn approached on their 7th consecutive night of battle, Miguel realized their fight was about more than personal survival. They were protecting something ancient and irreplaceable, a delicate balance that humans had forgotten existed. Elena's final words that night were a mixture of warning and hope. "We are not just fighting for the trees," she whispered, her body now more spirit than flesh. "We are fighting for everything that lives." The journey had only just begun, and their greatest challenges were yet to come. The breaking point came during the winter solstice, the most vulnerable moment in the spiritual calendar. Miguel had known something was different from the moment he woke. The air felt charged, almost electric. Elena stood by the window, her body no longer fully human. Translucent lines of energy pulsed beneath her skin, tree-like patterns shifting like living tattoos. "They're coming," she whispered, her voice a combination of human speech and something older, the sound of wind. Through ancient forests, the logging company's final assault was more than an ecological operation. It was a deliberate attack on the mountain's spiritual core. Satellite images Miguel had obtained revealed a terrifying truth. They were targeting the last sacred grove, a place Elena called the Heart of Remembrance. This was more than deforestation. This was spiritual warfare. The first wave of attack came silently. Machinery moved like predators through the early morning mist. But these were no ordinary logging trucks. Each vehicle seemed to carry a malevolent energy. Machines that were more than metal and diesel. They were instruments of destruction powered by something darker. Elena's transformation was complete. Her body became a living conduit of forest energy. Roots emerged from her feet, connecting her directly to the earth. Her hair became a living network of branches and vines, her eyes pools of liquid moonlight. Miguel realized he was watching the last of an ancient guardian race make her final stand. "I cannot stop them alone," she told him, her voice breaking. "But together, we might have a chance." The critical moment was both physical and metaphysical. As the logging machines approached, the forest itself began to resist. Trees bent in impossible ways. Roots erupted from the ground, creating natural barricades. But the machines kept coming, powered by a hunger that went beyond corporate profit. Miguel discovered his own hidden abilities in that moment of absolute crisis. His scientific mind, once a barrier to understanding, became a weapon. He could see the energy lines Elena had spoken about, intricate networks of spiritual connection running through the forest like invisible bloodlines. Each tree was more than just wood and leaves. They were living memories, repositories of ancient knowledge. The battle was fought on multiple planes. Physically, they worked to block the logging operations. Legally, Miguel used every academic and professional connection to raise alarms. Spiritually, Elena unleashed powers that defied human understanding. But the cost was catastrophic. With each moment of resistance, Elena was losing herself. Her body became more spirit than flesh, her connection to the human world growing increasingly fragile. Miguel watched in horror as the woman he loved began to dissolve into pure energy. The logging company's true nature revealed itself. Behind the machinery was an ancient entity, a spiritual parasite that fed on ecological destruction. It wasn't just about timber or profit. This was a calculated assault on the mountain's spiritual ecosystem, a deliberate attempt to sever the connection between the physical and spiritual worlds. Their enemies were not just human. Shadow entities began to emerge, formless creatures that consumed spiritual energy. They moved like living darkness, targeting the weakest points in the forest's protective barriers. Miguel realized they were witnessing an invasion that went far beyond environmental destruction. Elena's final transformation was both beautiful and terrifying. She became a living bridge between the human world and the ancient forest spirit. Her body was no longer just a physical form, but a conduit of pure ecological energy. Trees responded to her pain. Animals gathered in silent solidarity. The very mountain seemed to breathe with her struggle. "We are the last," she told Miguel, her voice fading. "If we fall, everything falls with us." The critical moment was a convergence of everything they had fought for. Miguel, once a pure scientist, now understood the delicate balance between the seen and unseen worlds. Elena, the last of her kind, was making her final stand. As the logging machines broke through the final natural barrier, Miguel and Elena stood, united, not as husband and wife, not as human and mythical being, but as guardians of something far more ancient and important than individual survival. The mountain held its breath, the forest prepared for its final battle, and everything, absolutely everything, hung in the balance. Salvation came from the most unexpected source. As Elena dissolved into pure energy, as the forest trembled on the brink of total destruction, a sound emerged. Not a human sound, not an animal sound. Something that existed between memory and hope. The children of the mountain arrived. They came silently, dozens of them. Not human children, but spirit guardians, ancient beings who had watched over these lands long before human memory. Their ages ranged from what seemed like 5 to 12, but their eyes held centuries of wisdom. Each child carried a fragment of the forest's memory. Miguel watched in awe as they formed a circle around Elena. Their hands, small and luminescent, began to weave an intricate pattern of energy. The logging machines, those monstrous instruments of destruction, began to slow, their mechanical sounds distorting into something almost painful. "We remember," the eldest child said, stepping forward. Her voice was a chorus of whispers, of ancient languages long forgotten. "We remember what was promised." The breakthrough was not a moment of violent triumph, but of profound reconnection. These spirit guardians were the descendants of the original forest protectors. Bound to the land, they had watched silently as humans slowly destroyed the delicate ecological balance. Elena was their last connection to the old ways, the final bridge between human understanding and spiritual preservation. Miguel discovered the true nature of their mission. The logging was more than an economic endeavor. It was a deliberate attempt to sever the spiritual connections that had protected the mountain for millennia. Each tree cut was a wound to the collective memory, a destruction of living history. The children began to sing. It was not a song in any language Miguel could understand. It was a sound that transcended language, a melody of roots and memories, of water and stone, of life's most fundamental connections. The forest responded. Trees that had been nearly cut through began to heal. Machines started to malfunction in ways that defied mechanical logic. Elena, who had been fading, suddenly became solid again. Her body was no longer just a human form or a forest spirit. She was a living bridge, part human, part guardian, entirely connected. Miguel watched as she merged with the children's energy, becoming something entirely new. "We are not defeated," she told him, her voice now a complex harmony of multiple beings. "We are transformed." The breakthrough was multifaceted. Scientifically, Miguel began to understand the complex ecosystem of spiritual energy. Each living thing was not just a biological entity, but a repository of memory and connection. The forest was a living network, more complex than any computer system, more intelligent than any human construction. The logging company's machinery began to transform, metal twisted into root-like structures. Diesel engines became conduits of green energy. The very instruments of destruction were being rewritten, repurposed by the forest's collective intelligence. Rodrigo, the local shaman, appeared as if summoned by the moment. "Some battles," he told Miguel, "are not won by fighting. They are won by remembering." The children explained their existence in fragments. They were the guardians of ecological memory beings who could move between physical and spiritual planes. Their purpose was not to destroy, but to preserve, to remember, to reconnect what humans had broken. Elena's transformation was complete. She was no longer just Miguel's wife or a forest guardian. She had become a living bridge between human understanding and ecological consciousness. Her body was a map of connections, tree roots, water systems, animal migrations, all flowing through her like living data. The mountain itself seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. Miguel understood now why Elena had chosen him. Not for love alone, but because his scientific mind could bridge the gap between empirical understanding and spiritual reality. He was to be a translator, a witness to this profound reconnection. "We are not separate," the eldest child told him. "Humans, trees, spirits, we are a single living system." The breakthrough was about understanding, not conquest. The logging company's project collapsed not through violence, but through a fundamental transformation of purpose. Their machinery, their very intention, was rewritten by the forest's collective intelligence. As dawn broke, the mountain looked different, not destroyed, not conquered, transformed. Elena stood beside Miguel, no longer fully human, no longer purely spirit. She was something new, a living embodiment of ecological consciousness. "We have a story to tell," she said. "A story of connection." The children of the mountain nodded. Their work was not finished. It was just beginning. Life after the breakthrough was nothing like anyone expected. The mountain transformed, not just metaphorically, but literally. The once threatened forest became a living research site, a place where science and spirit coexisted in ways that challenged everything Miguel had ever understood about ecological systems. Their home became a sanctuary of unprecedented research. Scientists from around the world began to arrive cautiously at first, then with increasing excitement. What Miguel and Elena had discovered was more than an ecological phenomenon. It was a complete reimagining of how living systems communicate, adapt, and survive. Elena was no longer fully human, but neither was she completely a spirit. She existed in a state of beautiful complexity. Some days, she appeared completely normal, preparing coffee, reading scientific journals, engaging in academic discussions. Other times, her body would become translucent, roots emerging from her feet, connecting directly to the Earth's energy. Networks. The children of the mountain became their closest allies. These spirit guardians, no longer hidden, began to work with local communities. They taught sustainable practices, showed how ecological systems could be protected and nurtured. Schools began to incorporate their teachings, blending traditional scientific understanding with a deeper, more holistic view of nature. Miguel's research took an unprecedented turn. His scientific papers became bridges between empirical observation and spiritual understanding. He documented the complex communication systems of the forest, how trees shared resources, how spiritual energy moved through ecological networks, how memory existed beyond physical form. "We are not studying nature," he would tell his students. "We are listening to it." The logging company that had threatened the mountain underwent a complete transformation, not through legal action or protest, but through a fundamental shift in understanding. Its leadership experienced a collective awakening, a sudden comprehension of the deeper connections they had been blind to. Rodrigo, the local shaman, explained it as a form of collective healing. "Some wounds," he told Miguel, "can only be healed by remembering who we truly are." Their daily life became a delicate dance of multiple realities. Breakfast might start normally, Elena preparing traditional Filipino dishes. But midway through the meal, she might partially dissolve, becoming a network of roots and living energy, sharing complex ecological data that Miguel would then translate into scientific language. The spirit children became frequent visitors. They would appear during research sessions, during quiet moments, during community gatherings, not as supernatural entities to be feared, but as teachers, as guardians, as living repositories of ancient knowledge. Miguel discovered he had changed too. His scientific perception had expanded. He could now see the energy lines Elena had once described, complex networks of connection that ran through everything. Trees, animals, humans, all were part of a single, breathing system. Their home became an international center of ecological research. Universities funded expeditions. Indigenous knowledge keepers collaborated with cutting-edge scientists. The mountain became a living laboratory, a place where the boundaries between science, spirituality, and ecological understanding completely dissolved. Elena's transformation continued. Some days she was more forest than human. Other days she was a bridge explaining complex, ecological systems with the precision of a scientist and the wisdom of an ancient guardian. Miguel learned to translate, to help the world understand. The children of the mountain showed them something profound. Ecological destruction was not just about physical damage. It was a spiritual wound, a severing of fundamental connections that allowed living systems to communicate, to heal, to evolve. We are not separate, the eldest child would often say. We are a single living intelligence. Their relationship evolved beyond traditional human understanding. Miguel and Elena were no longer just husband and wife. They were partners in a much larger mission, guardians of a new way of understanding life itself. Their love was a form of ecological connection, a bridge between human limitation and spiritual potential. The local community changed. Traditional farmers began to see their lands differently. They learned to listen, to understand the complex communication systems of their environment. Agriculture became a dialogue, not a conquest. International recognition came, but it was not what they expected. Instead of awards or scientific accolades, they received something more profound. Indigenous communities from around the world began to reach out. They recognized in Miguel and Elena's work an ancient wisdom they had always known. As years passed, their mission became clear. They were not just protecting a mountain. They were showing humanity a different way of existing, a way of connection, of listening, of understanding that we are not separate from nature, but a fundamental part of it. The new normal was not about conquering or understanding. It was about listening, about remembering, about reconnecting. And in that reconnection, everything was possible. Coming up, 2 more unforgettable stories await you. If this one stirred something inside you, don't let the next ones pass you by. Click to watch and make sure to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a moment with us.